I'm Paul Comfort, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Transit Unplugged. We have an awesome interview today for our podcast with Dave Genova, CEO of the Denver Regional Transportation District. Dave gives us some insight into his background coming from the safety and asset management field, how they're building out a massive rail and BRT system around the Denver area, and what he sees as the future of transit. It's a fascinating interview from one of the top leaders in our industry and an all-around outstanding guy on today's episode of Transit Unplugged.
What does it mean to be a successful public transit agency? What are you doing to lead the way? It's time to learn from the top transit professionals in North America. This is Transit Unplugged with your host, Paul Comfort.
I'm Paul Comfort, your host of Transit Unplugged, and today we're at the APTA Bus and Paratransit Conference in Tampa, Florida, and I'm excited to be with Dave Genova, who is the CEO of Denver RTD, one of the greatest transit systems in America. I'm not just saying that because you're here. I really believe it. It's great to have you with us, Dave.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thanks for the compliment on the agency. I wish everybody in our backyard felt that way every day. It's good to hear. Thank you.
What's that street you got downtown where you've kind of made it a transit street?
16th Street Mall. It was originally built in 1983 is when we opened that for service. It's kind of a combination transit mall and pedestrian mall. It's interesting you ask about it, Paul, because we're right now working with the City and County of Denver, the Downtown Denver Partnership. You know, the mall's reached its useful life, its construction. We're spending about $1 million a year maintaining the transitway. So we want to rebuild the entire mall, but not just rebuild the transitway, but the city's interested in making it a great space for people to connect and hang out and linger. And of course, it's a vital piece. It's not just a shuttle that we operate. It's a vital piece of the first and final mile for us in downtown.
Okay.
The 16th Street Mall connects our major transit centers at either end of downtown, our Civic Center station, and of course our multimodal Denver Union Station, which has just grown beyond all capacity in the last few years after we've renovated and turned it truly into a multimodal hub. There's about $3 billion worth of private development just happening around Union Station. But the mall shuttle, a couple interesting things. We move about 45,000 people a weekday.
Okay.
About 80% of the people that take that shuttle have already taken transit into Denver, and they're using that for their first and final mile. And about 40% of the people that commute or that work downtown are taking transit to commute. And then the final very exciting thing about the mall shuttle, we just have a brand new fleet on there. It's 36 all-electric buses. I think somebody told me it's the largest electric subfleet in the U.S. yesterday. So
that's awesome, Dave.
So we're very excited about the electrification, and we think it's the future of power plants on transit coaches, and we certainly jumped into the electrification area.
That's great. When I was at MTA in Baltimore, we looked at what you were doing at 16th Street as a model for what we wanted to do in downtown Baltimore. And the other thing we kind of copied after you did the Denver Eagle light rail P3. And of course, I was doing the Purple Line in Baltimore, near DC. And we ended up with the same companies that had led your concessionaire group as ours, and we were so happy because they had learned all the stuff they needed to learn on yours, so they wouldn't make any issues with ours. So it's kind of funny, the connections.
Yes, it's interesting. It's a small world that we live in transit, and hopefully they did learn some things to apply on your project. That project's light rail. Ours was commuter rail.
That's right.
Three commuter rail lines, all the rolling stock, a new maintenance facility. We've got one more line to get open to get that entire project pushed across the line. The great thing about that project is our commuter rail service to the airport, the University of Colorado A line.
Okay.
Ridership's growing almost by the day. We're over 20,000 people weekday are riding that line, and we're starting to even look at capacity about whether we need to put more cars out on that line or not. It's been a great, well-received service by the public with about 35,000 employees that work at DIA. And of course, I think it's about the fifth busiest airport now in the country.
Yeah,
so
flown through there many times.
It's great service. So
now,
we like it.
I want to talk about your background in a minute, but since we've already kind of we dove right in here, tell us about the scope of service. What do you all operate there at RTD? How many employees? What's your budget? That kind of stuff.
Well, I think one of the really unique things about us is, unlike a lot of major metropolitan areas, we are the single transit provider for the entire Denver metropolitan region, meaning we provide the fixed route bus services, we provide paratransit services, we provide light rail, and we provide commuter rail services. So all integrated under one agency, integrated schedules, integrated fare, and payment.
Nice.
So I think the seamlessness of the integration seems to work really well. where we're not kind of chopped up with different payment platforms or different kinds of scheduling. We're all integrated into one organization. Our current operating budget is just over $600 million a year for operations. We operate about 1,000 buses. We have 172 light rail vehicles, 66 commuter rail vehicles. I don't know the number of routes off the top of my head. 10,000 bus stops. Well, another unique thing about us is our service area.
10,000 bus stops, dude.
Yeah, and our service area, Paul, 2,400 square miles is our service area. I think there's only a few other transit agencies are that size, and that gives us, some significant challenges, because as we get out into the really suburban and even less suburban outreaches of our district, it gets very challenging to provide cost-effective service in those areas. But we've addressed that in some regards by a service is what we call call and ride, and it's really microtransit that we've been operating for probably 2 decades now. Wow. And we have 22 distinct operating areas where we have call and ride services. It's a cutaway van. They're all lift equipped. And much of what I heard in the mobility session today on the mobility workshop is a lot of the things we're already doing and have been doing for a long time. It really is mobility on demand, but it was the old name call and ride. We're working on rebranding that to make it a little bit more glamorous and to fit kind of a little bit more of the technology and mobility on demand things that are happening today. So that's kind of the scope of services we operate. We have an elected board of directors, 15 board members that
they're elected by the public?
Report to. They are elected, and they each represent one geographic area of our district. All right. So it's a very interesting dynamic. They're very good at operating regionally, even though they represent an area. But
they look for the greater good.
It's a good work. Yeah.
And how are you funded?
Our funding is predominantly a 1% sales tax. That's the lion's share of our revenue.
Yeah.
It's about 60% of our revenue.
Okay.
When we were originally formed as an agency in 1969, our sales tax base was 0.6, and we call that our base system. In 2004, we were successful with our what we call our FasTracks program, and that was a sales tax initiative increase of 0.4 cents. And with that, we were able to build out a lot of commuter rail, light rail, bus rapid transit, and we still have a couple projects underway in that particular area as well.
And employee counts, those kind of things?
About 2,900 employees.
Okay.
And we also contract out about 50% of our fixed route bus. We contract out our paratransit, and of course our commuter rail is under the P3 or concession agreement. So there's a lot of contracted employees out there too.
I remember like 20 years ago when I was at Mayflower, don't you all have some kind of law that says you have to outsource a certain amount of work, that you're very unique in that respect?
Originally, it was a legislation that was passed at the state level a long time ago, and it was a minimum. It was a minimum of 20% of our rubber-tired service had to be contracted out. And so that legislation has changed over time where that minimum's risen, and now we have, I think the legislation reads that there's a ceiling of about 57%. So we can't go more than 57% contracted out. And I would say right now we're probably right around 54% of the fixed route is contracted out.
And who does that work for you?
Right now, we have about 4 different contracts.
Oh, okay. So you spread it out, not just one. Yeah, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
I just saw the providers, and it's escaping me right off the top of my head.
But it's split up among a number of providers.
Yeah, 2 different providers right now, 4 different RFP contracts.
Gotcha. One of the... I've just come up with a new deal I'm speaking about around the country called the 5 hidden flaws of most major transit systems. Kind of came to me as I analyzed things. And one of the ones that came to me was a concern I had at MTA. So we had 3,300 employees in Baltimore. We had 2,000 contractors. And a lot of those are like embedded from these big architectural engineering firms and these hard caps of pin caps, the number of employees that you're allowed to have that are put in place by budgets or boards or governments. But you need those positions. And so you end up contracting out for them, paying more than you would have otherwise because you have to pay overhead to these big companies, et cetera. Do you see that around the industry too as an issue?
Well, I think in our area, we don't really have a hard cap on employee headcount.
That's good.
I mean, we typically deal with a headcount every year during our budget process or every half year during our amended budget cycle that we take a look at. And I would say it's always challenging to add any headcount.
Right.
But, over the last few years, what we've been doing is we've been looking at the approach of, if it's budgeted, it doesn't make a difference to us whether that person, if we can bring those people on board, turn them into a full-time FTE, and then pay less per person, but still stay within what we're budgeted for. That's kind of the model we've been using.
What a brilliant idea, Dave.
Well, and of course, in some areas, it's more challenging than that because a lot of times we're bringing in expertise.
I was going to say, there is some specialty stuff, right?
Right. There's specialty stuff that either we can't afford to bring in that talent or we don't have a long-term need for that kind of talent.
Right.
So we
have to
use consultants and contractors. And that works really well. And we use that model as we staffed up for our FasTracks program. It was to date, we've invested about $5.6 billion worth of transit infrastructure in FasTracks and various projects. And so to do that model, we brought on a program management consultant.
Yes.
And
that makes sense.
At about half of the staff necessary to do that capital program.
Right.
And so it was a good mix. They're embedded with our staff. It's truly an extension of staff. You don't really know who's an RTD employee and who's working for a consultant when you walk down the hall. And oftentimes I'll ask a question like, I didn't realize that person works for Jacobs or LTK or whoever.
That to me makes sense. That's a good use of those positions because just like you said, it's a temporary project. You don't want to have all that pension liability and everything else you get with that employee. But that's a good approach. That's nice to hear that you guys don't have to have a hard cap. I want to get to that Tracks program, but I want to get back to your career. We never got to talk about that because your career is really interesting. So tell us how in the world did you end up as CEO of what rank are you, would you say, of a fifth largest transit system or something like that? Or what do you know, based on miles or vehicles?
Well, we're in the top 10. When you take out the legacy systems, we're one of the top 10 transit agencies by size. And, I always like to ask when I'm at leadership classes or we're in one of our development programs, I always like to ask how many people planned on a career in transportation. And you see very few hands go up, and I'm one of those. So I have a bachelor's degree in geology. I did about 3 years in the oil and gas industry, and then I went into the environmental field and did a lot of safety work. And then I started in transit. I answered an ad in the newspaper, right? It's not only do I feel like a dinosaur when I tell this story, but everyone tells you never get jobs out of the newspaper. Right. You get jobs by networking. But 24 years ago, I answered an ad for the safety and environmental manager at RTD, and here I am, 24 years later, as the general manager and CEO. So most of my experience and my career in transit has been as the chief safety officer at RTD. I've also had the security role there. I oversaw facilities for a while. And then another thing that I'm really excited about is while I was assistant general manager of safety, security, and facilities, which was a position I had immediately previous to the GM and CEO role, I was our executive sponsor or champion for our asset management and state of good repair program. And that's a program we started in 2010. We're way ahead of the regs on this, and we're getting some great data. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's a great program. We're using it a lot for our enterprise risk management, making some good data-driven decisions because of that.
That's great.
Of that program that's put in place. So I've been the GM and CEO now for 3 years.
Okay.
And so it's been a great industry. I've been engaged a lot with APTA as far as working on committees, and now I'm on the executive committee and on the board of directors of APTA. And
congratulations.
I'm big on professional development, and that's one thing that I like to stress when I talk about my story is just that, I continue to develop every day. I'm not done. I'm not over. Every day I'm learning something, and I really like to work with our people and mentoring people within our organization and within the industry and giving back and really helping coach, mentor, and develop people. So interesting side story, Paul. When I was assistant general manager, and we had the general manager at the time when I went into that role is a gentleman by the name of Cal Marcella. And he's passed now, Cal, unfortunately, but he really was the visionary behind FasTracks. And I think we have him to thank for where we are today as far as casting that vision. But one day I was in his office and he said to me, Dave, one day when you're going to be the GM, and you will be one day. And I left that meeting thinking, I'd never really thought about it before. But it was that day when Cal planted that seed that kind of put the aspiration in me to be a general manager. And then the other thing that was really interesting, I think, about my story is that I just didn't want to be a GM anywhere. I'm just incredibly privileged and fortunate that I'm the GM and CEO in my hometown of Denver.
Right.
That's what I like about it the most. I love that I have a job where I get up every morning and get to serve the community, number one, and I get to work alongside a great team of people that we have.
Now, I know more than many that a GM job is 24/7, but what do you like to do for fun? Denver's a great city to live in. There's lots of stuff there, right?
Denver is a great city. We're known for being kind of an outdoors city and people being active. And when I'm not working, I'm trying to get in a workout. I like cycling, bicycling. In the summertime, I ride my cruiser bike to work every day. That's a cruiser pedal bike.
Okay.
I'm able to just jump on my bike, put on some shorts and a T-shirt, and of course a helmet. I believe in safety. And basically get on a bike trail and get to work in about 20 minutes. And it's a great way to, get a little exercise in the morning, enjoy the summer weather, and show up at work and invigorated and ready to go. So I enjoy doing that. And my wife and I are big believers in our community. We give back in a lot of different ways. We like to mentor. We really believe in marriage, and it's probably the most important thing to us. And so we spend a lot of time working with young couples and with 20-somethings and doing mentoring and that. And
that's wonderful,
and we
Dave.
find it very rewarding. But as you probably know, Paul, when you step into a mentoring role, people think that the mentees are often thinking, wow, I'm going to get so much out of this. Thank you for doing this. But I think we get more out of it than the mentees. So we continue to grow as we give back. And so those are some of the things that we get engaged in and we like to do and enjoy.
That's great. So let's go to that FasTracks program. So tell me about that, and then also, you guys are so innovative. One thing I want you to touch on, if we can remember this conversation, is I was at a conference a year or two ago when one of your young men was talking about using unmanned aerial drones to check out the asset management, which I brought back to people I was working with, and I've told that story to like 20 people, and people are like, oh, now it's kind of more common. People are using it more, but you were one of the first ones to do it. So tell us about that, and then about FasTracks and everything else.
Well, let's talk about the use of the drone first, then we'll get into FasTracks, because that's probably a bigger story.
Okay.
So, I already told you earlier that I was the one that was kind of the executive sponsor for asset management and state of good repair within the organization. And in fact, back in about 2010, it came out of one of our board retreats as a strategic priority for us. And I was really glad to see that, the foresight of our board and listening to a couple ideas us as staff kind of threw up against the wall at the retreat as areas where we needed to be focused. And so we stood up the program. We have about 16 employees that make up that division. The division reports up through safety, so it's truly an independent
asset management reports through safety.
Yes, it does.
That is something.
And we set it up that way, and I thought it was great because it was independent, and it's not like you have people that are responsible for programs, looking at the assets.
Right.
And so we knew when we embarked on this, it was going to be a challenging area because, people don't want you looking up under their tent, right?
That's right, yeah.
And so we took on the mindset of, we weren't going to be looking at procedures or policies or how people did things or really the quality of what they were doing. We really focused in on doing the condition assessments of the assets.
Okay.
And so from there, we fortunately did an Oracle conversion a number of years before that. So we had a lot of data that we could start mining. And so we had to do a bunch of different patches and some other different software and everything. But we're using a variety of different data. We're looking at performance of the asset. We're looking at the age of the asset. And then one of the components that's escaping me right now, but I'll think of it as we're going. But we basically have three pieces. Reliability. So
okay, all right.
So we're looking at the cost to maintain, we're looking at reliability, and we're looking at the age of the asset. It all rolls up into a condition assessment. The team can give us an overall score for RTD as an organization. We can do it according to rolling stock. We can go down to subfleet. We can even look at systems and components on the fleets and on the subfleets.
Great.
So we can drill down and see, hey, if this subfleet's getting a lower score than another subfleet, we can go in and ask the question, well, why is it? I mean, we can drill down to, is it a component like the HVAC unit or transmission or something else that's driving the score one way or the other.
And that helps you do your capital budget, right, for your planning.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the other great thing about it is that we've got such confidence in what we're doing on the condition assessments because every asset gets a condition assessment every year. So rolling stock,
that's infrastructure, a lot of work. That's why you need 16
facilities.
People, right?
Right. And the great news about that 16 people is they're mostly people internal to the organization. One guy came from facilities, people came from bus, people came from IT, people came from procurement. So we were really able to collect all of their years of experience and put all that together and build all that information in, which was really, really great.
And that's where you use the drone?
Fast forward to the drone. So the team came to me and they said, hey, Dave, we want to start using drones. And particularly they were talking about the rail right away because instead of having to schedule windows and impact the operating schedule and patrons with having to work around work crews, they said, what if we use drones and we won't even have to interrupt service. We don't have to put people out there in safety considerations or in harm's way. And the very first thing I thought I thought, well, this is really great. But I told the team, I said, I can already see the article, RTD's new toy. So I was very worried about how that was going to get rolled out from a publicity aspect. And I said, we really have to have this story told well about what a great asset, what a great tool this is to us. Because I don't want people thinking, hey, we're just using it because it's the next newest shiny thing, kind of a toy. But it's been great. So we use it to do asset condition assessments along the rail line. And then we've also been using it for other activities that we didn't imagine it at first. So, we had a roof leak on one of our facilities. We couldn't figure out what was going on. We put the drone up there with a thermal camera, and we could see where the leak was underneath the roof and fix that. We've used them to film our emergency drills so that then we can go back and use that as part of our debriefing. So it's been a really great tool.
That's great. All right, FasTracks.
Okay, FasTracks. 2004 voter-approved tax increase of 0.4, really to build out about 6 or 7 corridors and redevelop our Denver Union Station.
Rebuild out rail, BRT, what are we talking?
Combination. So It was commuter rail, light rail, bus rapid transit, and complete renovation and rebuilding of Denver Union Station and truly turning it into a multimodal hub.
I've got to come see that, man.
You got to come. Hey, we got the rail conference is there in June. Come check us out. So the original program called for about 122 miles of rail and a bus rapid transit line, about 6 or so corridors. And we were successful in building most of it out. Of course, right after we were successful getting the vote passed, we went into that recession of 2007, 2008. So we estimate we lost about $1 billion of revenue during that recessionary period. Huge impact on our ability to build out the program. At the same time, we saw huge increases in the cost of construction materials. And so our original estimate was about $4.6 billion, I believe, to build out our program. We were a couple of years into it, and because of these factors, the recession, because of the rising costs of construction materials and diesel fuel and other things, and the rising cost of labor, we realized we had about a $2 billion gap to be able to build out what we needed to be built out. So fast forward to today, we've invested about $5.6 billion into the program. Wow. We've completed everything except for 4 elements of the program. One of them is a fairly long commuter rail line. It's about a $1.6 billion project from Denver up to Boulder and Longmont. And then we have 3 other smaller projects that are remaining. So we figured we need about another $2.2 billion of capital to complete the project. But I think the good news and the good story to tell is, we thought it was going to be a $4.6 or $7 billion program, and we've been able to bump that up to $5.6 billion.
That's great.
While we still have to get a couple other projects done, and we're still fully committed to it, we think we've done a good job building out the system. It's ridership's been good all throughout. So I'll try to break it down. It was 2 light rail lines, 1 bus rapid transit line, and 3 commuter rail lines is what we've built so far. We have another commuter rail line under construction that'll open in a couple of years, and then another light rail extension underway. And of course, Denver Union Station. And around Denver Union Station, before we did FasTracks and the renovation to Union Station, it was just rail yard and vacant parcels. Now it's like a brand new downtown, Paul. We estimate there's about $3 billion worth of private development happening around Denver Union Station.
Wow.
An incredible success story. The financial models are way ahead. We were able to pay off our RIF loans. I think we were the first agency ever to pay off a RIF loan, and now we're trying to get our credit risk premium back out of DOT. But they don't have a mechanism to repay those. Because nobody's done it before.
So pave the way. Huh?
It's been great. But we consider FasTracks to be very successful. We've got some work left. We get a lot of organizations that come and visit us and say, how did you get FasTracks done? How did you get the support around the vote? And of course, I think another unique thing about Denver, our Metro Mayors Caucus, a consortium of all the Metro mayors, got behind FasTracks and unanimously supported the FasTracks investment. So that was huge in getting it passed.
That was an amazing story about the political support that's necessary to get the funding needed to implement the vision that your board and you saw. So you're in a unique position, not only as a executive board member of our national association, but literally, you're probably the highest run transit system in America. You can see over the mountain in Denver because you're a mile high, right? So what do you see coming for our industry? What's coming now? How do we remain relevant? There's only a couple transit systems that are seeing growth in their ridership in the country. I know you're doing all kinds of cool things. What do you see coming and how do we get there?
Great questions. I think, we're all focused on trying to solve this new mobility paradigm that we're calling it. We all are looking at how do we provide more mobility options that are accessible and equitable and affordable. And the private sector doesn't have to worry about those things. Private sector just gets to go out and cherry pick the different kinds of services they want to do. But what works for us works for them. I mean, we're all efficient, the most efficient when we're working in the most dense areas. So we've got work to do to stay relevant. I'm glad to see lately, though, in the conversations we're seeing from folks, is that maybe a year ago there was a lot of conversation about all these new technologies and these new mobility services are going to replace transit. But now we're starting to see how some of them are contributing to congestion, and people are saying, yeah, those things are really good complementary, and yeah, they may replace some of our less efficient kinds of services, but transit is the backbone. I mean, transit, when you see, and we've all seen the slides of, here's 100 people in cars, here's 100 people in Uber and Lyft cars, here's 100 people in 100 autonomous vehicles, and here's 100 people in a bus or a train, right? And the congestion limits. So while I think we've got a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities, we've been working on things on how we're using technology largely to make the customer-facing experience more friendly, more tech-driven, and more truly on demand. I think it's really going to be challenging, though, as we're all talking about this, really to be efficient with those services is still going to remain incredibly challenging. An area in tech where we've been, I think, really successful is I think we have just about every way a person can buy fare within our system now. We just implemented mobile ticketing last year. The great thing about mobile ticketing, how all these tech projects and system projects go. I think we took that project from RFP to stand up in 4 months. It was operational.
Holy moly.
And so that's the great thing, I think, about a platform like mobile ticketing that's not as challenging as a smart card system.
Right.
We've all been through the pain and suffering of standing up smart card systems. And now what I think about is when I look at our smartphones, I'm thinking about, in 4 or 5 years, what is the device or non-device that we're going to be using that we rely on our smartphones now? So I think the challenges that we need to be thinking about and down the road on is really thinking way out. But we talk a lot about the labor in our industry, and that's something maybe I'll touch on in a moment. But one of the areas where I see a gap is who are the people that can think about these things and bring those ideas together. It's like, I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a bunch
and you guys are up to your necks in alligators.
A bunch of young tech guys. Right. So, so it's in our organizations, we almost need like this innovation lab where we bring in, I don't know what you call them, the best and brightest, but, younger, tech savvy, and throw them in a room and see what they come out with. But
those innovators, right?
Yeah, because it's hard for us as we're in the day-to-day job of just delivering services to get out on those edges. And we talked about jobs earlier and headcount. And that's an area where it's like, hey, you go to your board and say, hey, I need this group to be working on this stuff or we're going to miss the boat. So I think that's
Are you doing that? Are you bringing in some of the young innovators at RTD?
We're kind of on the edge of that. We stood up a continuous improvement and innovation group about a year or two ago.
Good.
But we need to be doing a lot more with innovation. We really do. One of the things we did just this year is we've stood up what I call a regional mobility strategy, and kind of along the conversations we've been having at APTA, that I call it, we're on the cusp of a transportation transformation. And if we don't lead it, we're going to get left behind.
Yep.
So I've rallied my team and I've rallied our board around this concept of transportation transformation. We've made it a strategic priority for 2019. We've already started to pull together the transportation staff, people at the local and the county level, so we can have this dialogue around regional mobility. Because my concern is that the local jurisdictions and folks, everybody's getting impatient. They want to do their own things, but we need to maintain this regional focus. And as the public transit provider in our region, I want to be leading that conversation. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to provide all the services, but let's be smart about, number one, identifying the problem we're trying to solve, that we're putting solutions out there that don't contribute to the problem, i.e. contribute to congestion, and that there's still regional links in what we're all doing. So if there's economies of scale that we can leverage and things like that. We're also participating in our organization in a thing called the Mobility Choice Blueprint. It's a partnership between the transit agency, our MPO, Denver Regional Council of Governments, and our state transportation group, CDOT. And so we all three are funding partners in this. We've brought in a firm, HDR, I believe is the firm that's doing this. At the end of a year, they're going to have a mobility blueprint for us. It's going to be focused on kind of the long-term planning. It's got a lot of stakeholder engagement in there. but we're also doing our own parallel activities as well. So we're spending a lot of time talking about this mobility. We dedicate an hour every week, my staff does, to just talking about transportation transformation. And it's a time where it is kind of an innovation lab for us, because it's a time where we have a topic or two every week. We brainstorm around it. We have agendas around it. We want to make sure we're leaving no stone unturned in this area, and then see what we can throw against the wall that's going to stick.
Wow, that's great. I don't know anybody else who's doing that. That's spending time with their top leadership team just talking about tomorrow and not talking about today. What a great way to close out this interview. We were talking with Dave Genova today, who is the CEO, Chief Executive Officer and General Manager of one of the best run transit systems, one of the most innovative transit systems in America. Thanks so much for spending time with us today, Dave. And we look forward to following you in the transit press, because you guys have something going on every other week, it seems like, and seeing all the great innovations you're going to do and help lead our industry.
Thank you, Paul. Enjoyed the conversation.
Great.
You've been listening to Transit Unplugged, powered by Trapeze Group. To stay up to date, subscribe on iTunes or Google Play, or join the conversation at transitunplugged.com. Thanks for listening.